So that makes sense, doesn't it? Because obviously the seniority of their role and the wider scope that they've got, therefore impacts on a wider scale if they make an error. So what kind of errors have you come across that they make? And I only ask that because I know that presumably you've gone into solutions, which you must have done on the back of your survey, but I'm just helping people know, okay, what mistakes are really significant, as opposed to say, yeah, I made a fluff with a client, but there must be something that's triggering that sense of, wow, these are pretty, they make an impact here.
Mm-hmm. So some of the mistakes that my clients have made and that people have said throughout my courses that have said that they have made, a big one is when they lose their cool with a team member. Right. And emotional intelligence is a huge leadership skill. But when you are stressed, you're not going to have a full cup, right? If you're stressed out, and that was a question I asked about percentage you're stressed out or emotionally exhausted. And people were saying the longer you're in leadership, the less emotionally stressed you are. That's actually a learned skill as well. But they lose their cool on their team. Another big mistake that people make is the communication with their team. So the top 3 struggles that sales managers said they made were time management was the #1 struggle for new leaders. Feedback was #2 and accountability was #3. And feedback and accountability happen with communication. So not doing communication right, like they're not talking to their team enough. So they cannot build trust. They cannot get that feedback. They can't hold people accountable. So those are really big mistakes. I had a client a few weeks ago tell me that she's been at her company for a couple years and she's never had a performance review. And I went, what? Right? Like, what? You've never had a performance review? It just, here's the sales level, how you're doing. We assume because you're selling, you're okay. Anyway, so that's a big one as well.
That does seem a mistake, doesn't it? I mean, that seems very unfair as well, because I think, nobody's superhuman here. And just because we assume that you've got a thick skin when you're in sales, and I think, to be fair, we usually do assume that, you can cope with rejection, or you can cope with the difficulty of having to put things on repeat because there may be numerous clients that you take on and so forth. And client management is clearly a top skill that they required. It's a gross assumption to assume that they're not human enough that they need feedback to know where on earth they stand or whether they're doing something well. And as you said, the scale changes as soon as they get into a leadership role. And also, usually they're expected to feed up. They're expected to feedback so much more frequently upwards rather than just downwards, which changes because when you're in regular sales, it's mostly peer-to-peer and periodic feedback back up. But the nature of it, the accountability, the stakes, everything seems higher. Kind of is missing the point, isn't it? Yeah, it's kind of, I think
it is. Yeah. But you assume like, oh, they're going to figure it out. And that's the thing. Salespeople will figure it out. We all will figure it out at some point. It's just, what are the mistakes you're making? And you're right. The mistakes are much costlier when you're leading other people and they don't just impact you. And that's, there is a statistic, and I think we all know this, but there's no greater impact over someone's success than their direct manager, like none. And I was talking about this with a VP I'm in Minnesota, but at one of our global local brands here in Minneapolis. And he just said, he goes, it's such an issue for so many people, or you luck out having a great leader yourself, and it's such a responsibility to become a sales leader. And so when I look at, when I'm moving my course, I'm transitioning from the individual and the group to corporate, because when corporate can say, you know what, why would we spend all of our training and development money on salespeople and not on the people who directly impact those salespeople? The people who directly impact are the emerging leaders. We can't depend on the vice presidents of sales or director of sales or even the CEO. They're not talking to the salespeople. You know what I mean? Like and that's the biggest impact. And people who get into leadership want to help. They don't want to mess up, right? Their intentions are good. So I just feel like there's certain leadership skills and certain conversations and concepts that if you learned, right away, and we're intentional about not just knowing them, but implementing them consistently, it just erases a lot of mistakes.
It's
It helps you.
It's a game changer, isn't it? I can feel it.